actually a philanthropy consultant with MAPS, and a man, and who's been doing empty for over 40 years. I tell people I came out of the closet at 35 and out of the medicine cabinet at 65. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Itzel. Itzel grew up abroad, actually in Panama, with her family, and both growing up in California as well as Central America. At an early age, she developed a deep passion for photography, music, and writing. Itzel served for 6 years in the United States Air Force. She was stationed stateside as well as overseas, where she would forward deploy from Okinawa, Japan in 2007, 2008. Itzel served 2 short tours in Afghanistan and 1 tour in Southeast Asia. After her service, she returned back to California, where she returned to the federal service as a wildland firefighter for the United States Forest Service. Itzel is currently pursuing her bachelor's in psychology and followed by her graduate degree in counseling psychology to become a somatic therapist. She will continue her education in pursuit of her doctoral degree to better focus on assisting veterans, first responders, and other trauma-affected groups. And so we had a chance to meet last night and chat a little bit, and I think you're really going to enjoy learning more about her journey.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. Awesome. So I'm here to tell you my story. My current mentor has described the longest road in existence as being the one between the mind and the heart. And it's interesting because this is our throat, here's our brain, here's our heart. So many times and so often we get wrapped up in here and we forget how to get back here. Growing up, my queerness was first coming into my consciousness at the age of 6. And growing up in a religiously rigid home, my worldviews of safety and authenticity were very much affected by the 2 parenting styles that I witnessed. My father, even though to this day, rest his soul, he probably would never admit that he was more of a spiritual person. He embodied everything that I understand today as spirituality, as a faith-based practice, that you connect with what you believe is bigger than you. And experiencing that in the way that he spoke to people, the way that he connected with people, the religious element was completely removed from that, and it was so freeing. On the contrary, my mother was very much the authoritarian and drove with an iron fist and almost made it her mission to argue with people. And you're wrong, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it says it in the Bible. And that component, as I lived my life, really much did the opposite and drove me the furthest possible. It drove me from the connecting with going to church to completely going in the opposite direction of, I don't want to have anything to do with organized religion. Navigating through that made me think about how I needed to have an escape plan. Where was I going to go? Was I going to go to college? What was my experience going to be like after high school? My mother and father, they are from Panama. They prepared to immigrate in the early 80s, and they immigrated with my sister to the United States. Their immigratory process was something that allowed their worldviews to shift in a way that my mother was ensuring her success in this country through her acculturation process by education. Instead of my father, and against his wishes of, hey, please just stay home as a stay-at-home mom, I'll take care of everything. She was like, no, I'll become a nurse instead. And she pursued her education. She became a successful nurse. I have an older sibling that's 14 years my senior. And being able to witness how hard my mother worked as we transitioned back to Panama at 8 years old, that was my first immigratory process. I had to learn the language. I had to adapt to a culture that I wasn't very familiar with. And also figure out what I was experiencing after I realized, oh wow, I am gay. I could not have that conversation with anyone. It was something that, as the Bible thumping in the background was very prevalent, homosexuality is a sin, you're going to hell. And it was, there were these subtle and indirect messages of, gotta do what's right, gotta show up in the world this way. These are the binary boxes that you fit in, pick one. And experiencing school back home was an adjustment period of like 5 years, where right when I caught my bearings, my parents decided to bring me back to the United States, where I started high school. My sister also was having her son, so they figured, hey, free babysitter, right? Go ahead and help your sister. So I came back and again faced another readjustment period where understanding pop culture, understanding how to relate to teenagers my age, and at the time teenagers were pretty cruel. So then the dynamic shifted in parenting. My sister was now my parent. And at 16 years old, I didn't understand at the time what depression meant. I didn't understand that all of these factors, as I was trying to navigate what now I understand as my identity, was something that I just chose to suppress and to push forward until I found a way out. And my exit was the military. At first, I figured I want to be in public service in some way. From very young, I connected with people in a way that felt good, and it felt authentic, and I loved people. And how can I help people? Maybe I should go become a cop. Thank God that did not work out. I was a little too young. LAPD takes 21 and up anyway. My next option was to walk into the recruiter's office for the Marines. And my mother, through the phone, yelled at me and said, if you join the Marine Corps, I will disown you. I said, okay, well, I guess I'll go look at the Navy. I went into the Navy's office and I asked them one question and walked right back out. How long are you guys at sea? We don't know. Thank you for your time. I ended up in the Air Force recruiter's office, and after signing papers, I found my way out. At 19 years old, I stayed in a delayed entry program for a year. I entered the military, and I joined the United States Air Force. Basic training was a very eye-opening experience in the sense that there were all these people from different parts of the United States living a different experience, all coming together for a cause, whether it was education, whether it was patriotism, whether they were trying to escape their family. I still didn't know where I fell in the spectrum of queerness. I knew that I lived in fear constantly because I was so scared of being found out. And the don't ask, don't tell policy at the time was in place. So fast forward to my first year in active service. I was stationed out of Oklahoma, Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma. And oddly enough, the first thing I looked for when I got there was a church family. It's what I knew. My family is Seventh-day Adventist, and I searched and found what honestly, for the first time, felt like family, which was very interesting for me because there was no disclosure of my identity. There was no assumptions. There was only, hey, are you coming over after church for lunch? My worldview changed a little bit with religion. And it wasn't the premise of religion, but the premise of community that I, in reality, was searching for. And I was so thankful for, in that moment and in that time period, to be able to connect with people, the most unlikely group of people that welcomed me into their home. No questions asked. Come be with us, because we love the same thing. After 2 years of being in Oklahoma, I ended up getting shipped to Okinawa, Japan. And in 2007, I experienced my first deployment to Afghanistan. What a shock to my nervous system. Upon my arrival, we basically had to shift and wait for the all clear. Our helicopter that was coming to pick us up had experienced small arms fire that was 6 inches away from the rotor. If that gives you an idea to what we were getting into. I was in a support role. I was in aviation operations at the time. And my job in the military was to be of administrative support for pilots. At the time, I was attached to a search and rescue squadron. And looking back on it now, it would have really been nice to have the heads up of, hey, you're gonna probably be white knuckling it into into your final destination, but this is what you can expect. Returning home from that experience was, I now understand why they called it shell shock in World War I. Because it's not something that you really expect to surface. You don't expect to not be able to connect to your friends and family. There isn't this awareness of, oh, like I'm probably gonna need therapy after this. Or I need to speak to someone because I don't understand what I'm feeling and what's coming up for me. So my first deployment went unprocessed, and I'm off to be shipped to my second deployment. Coming back home, it was compounding. These things continued to pile up for me, and between that and continuing to figure out what my service was gonna look like, I was pretty much at the decision of staying in the military or leaving. And once I got my orders to my final base in New Mexico at Cannon Air Force Base, I was attached to a special ops squadron. And that last deployment was what really did it for me. We were in the business of medical transport and transportation in general at the time. No one knew we were there. And what kind of cemented my decision for separating from the military was transporting one of our service members that was in critical condition, being rolled into an aircraft with zero state of consciousness. And in that moment, I asked myself, what am I even doing here? Why am I here? And if you ask any service member why they join the military or why they enjoy being in that community space so much, it's because of the sense of community. It's because we're just all a band of misfits that are in this place together, that leave whatever conditions or whatever life that we had before to embark on this journey that we don't know where it's going to take us. But we're going through it together. That was my understanding of community. When I separated from the military, I had no plan. And all I knew is that I was reluctant to go back home because I knew what was waiting for me. My relationship with my sister growing up was very volatile. There were more screaming matches than civil conversations. So this was my first experience of regression to my 16-year-old self. It was challenging, to say the least, because I felt trapped. I felt like the world was caving in on me, and I did not know how to communicate everything that was going on inside of me. My first psychedelic experience was at 26. My friend, I said, hey, I know you have trouble sleeping. I know that, you're going through something. You want to do some mushrooms? I said, I don't really know much about anything about psychedelics. And as a matter of fact, as far as religion goes, it's probably a big no-no, right? Let's plan a camping trip and let's go up to the redwoods and let's figure this out. So nature became my first teacher. A year after, I came out to my father. And 2 weeks after I came out to him, he passed away in a motorcycle accident. So when I tell you that the world closed in on me quickly, my reality was in a place where I had no idea where the ground was. And for that time, I did not even understand how to process my grief. Again, I needed to figure an exit plan. What am I gonna do? I can't be here in the same familial space where all these patterns are continuing to be supported. I need to do something different. My family never really spoke about my father's death. No one wanted to process that. So I decided to move back up to San Francisco. And I started an EMT program, and I started to figure out, school is gonna be a good path for me. I'm gonna figure something out. I don't know what I wanna do, but I'm gonna get there. And after that, in 2013, a year after my father passed away, I ended up getting an apprenticeship with the Forest Service as a well-known firefighter. So back to LA I go. I start my job in wildland firefighting, and this is a high-stress environment. So it's like going back into the military, and I was loving it. It gave me structure. It gave me a place to feel purpose again. And in my 4th year of firefighting, my PTS really kicked in, full throttle, and I faced the decision of resigning. Shortly after that, I became homeless. And when I was living out of my car with my, at the time, partner and my dog, that was my rock bottom. But there was something inside of me that said, you know what, this is fine. This is really okay, because guess what? You're gonna figure it out. And I went to the VA on my birthday. Said, hey, I need some help. I don't know what this is. I didn't know that the term post-traumatic stress was a component of what I was experiencing. September of 2017, I received keys to the first stable housing situation in a very long time. I enrolled into Pasadena City College shortly after that. And connecting with the Veteran Resource Center there, they partner up with community partners, organizations that provide resources for veterans. And we were scheduled to go to a volunteer in Idlewild, California. So I did not want to go. I didn't want to have anything to do with veterans at that time. I didn't want to be around anyone. I was like, just leave me alone. I need to have contact with no one right now. I just want to focus on living again. And the Veteran Resource Center director was like, no, you're going. You're gonna go. I don't care. So kicking and screaming, I went up the hill. And this animal sanctuary rescues dogs and cats. They also have a sister organization called Warhorse Creek that rescues wild mustangs from the Bureau of Land Management. And they provide a gentling process for these horses, and then they pair them up with veterans. So when our time volunteering was finally done, I walked down to the stables and I saw this massive Mustang. Her back was basically to the middle of my forehead. And I looked into her eyes and I felt so seen for the first time in my life. And a volunteer came up to me and she was like, do you want to brush her? I said, yeah. Cool. And I brushed her and she told me her name. Her name was Libby, short for liberation. And the rest of my cohort came down because they wanted to see, we want to see the horses too. And an hour and a half passed by, and they're like, okay, we gotta go. We're not gonna interrupt this, whatever this is. And Libby and I, at the end of that hour and a half, were heart to heart in an embrace. She bowed her head, which in horse language is a symbol of trust and friendship. And I began to sob because I felt like a fridge had been lifted from my heart. At the time, the president of the organization came up to me because apparently this whole exchange happened while I was locked in with Libby. And they were so frightened that this horse would just... And he said, can I interview you? Like, do you feel like talking about what just happened? And I said, yeah. And then he asked me, do you think that this is something that can work for veterans? And I said, if it worked for me, I am confident that it will work for others. And that's how Horse Creek began to develop their program. I was patient 0. We gained traction. I started to volunteer and go up there as often as I could. And they put me on as a writer for the blog that they had developed. And things were going really well. And we were focusing on funding and making sure that this program grew to be able to reach as many veterans as we could. And then the pandemic hit. And the president of the organization now turned my friend and my mentor. In November of 2020, after the long conversations that we had, he was someone that really, really saw, like he had a knack for finding the special in people. And this is someone who is also a former Marine, very accomplished in his life as a writer. He did work in cinema and film, and he said, you know, you'd make a hell of a therapist one day. I said, you think so? I know so. I said, you know, I can't pursue any of that right now. I'm doing IT. And I gotta get a degree. I gotta find a job. I said, okay, well, just know that this is probably something that you'd enjoy. Plus you write and you're a photographer, so put all these things together. The last time I saw him, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. It just didn't feel like it was him. And a month later, the executive director now and business partner of my mentor gave me a call that I never thought I'd receive. November 24, 2020, my mentor took his life. And in that moment, the grief that I felt and the confusion that I felt was so overwhelming that in that moment of feeling so overwhelmed, I gained a moment of clarity. And the thought process was, the spiritual contract that you have now, tear it up. This is the contract that you enter now. And in that moment, I decided that IT is not the track that I was on. I needed to become a therapist. And here I am now, a month away from graduation. Thank you. And in the fall, I will be starting grad school as in training to do clinical psychology, but with a focus in somatic psychotherapy. And I don't know if you guys are Marvel fans, but for Doctor Strange, those moments that happen in life that create these effects, like if this moment did not happen, this would not happen. And I firmly believe that as painful as it was to lose him, it set me on a trajectory that has been this incredible aligning of life. I sit in awe every day when I look at where I am now. During that process of seeking resources from the VA, getting mental health assistance, I ended up being at the right place at the right time with the Long Beach VA. And I found a psychiatrist there that had a very holistic approach of working with veterans. She said, you know, I don't know if you're open to the idea of working with someone and doing a psychedelic assisted therapy. It would be outside of the VA. But, and I said, you know, I'll try anything once. And I connected with this therapist, and that's when I started my ketamine journey. And wouldn't you know it, that after 6 months of preparing what I now understand as preparation, that same psychiatrist and now friend said, hey, there's a veteran organization that connects veterans with psychedelic medicine, particularly ayahuasca. I said, what's an ayahuasca? I said, okay, put my name in the hat. Let's see what happens. A week later, Veterans of War calls me and said, hey, we got your application. We think you're a good fit. You'd be part of the first female cohort to go downrange to Costa Rica, to Soltara, to experience ayahuasca. I said, okay, I'm in. What do we need to do? We began our process in preparing with dieta, incorporating meditation, having check-ins. And I had not met any of these people except through Zoom. And it was incredible to feel that much community. I'm like, psychedelics are cool. We did 4 medicine journeys and integrated into a bigger group of civilians. And it was the most unique experience I've experienced in psychedelic medicine, because this curtain of separation that we experience as humans, medicines always have a great way of removing that and mapping you to connectedness. Doesn't matter who you are. So it was beautiful to be able to connect with a room of people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, queer and not. learning that in some way everyone had acquired trauma. And it didn't matter how they acquired that trauma, it still affects this nervous system the same way. So how do we navigate through that? And how do we heal each other? And I love the term ceremony because that's what the circles are called, but hearing people and their experiences and witnessing the rawness of people's lived experience and to be standing as giants amongst each other, pushing forward, was incredible. And it gave me so much hope. My integration process was challenging because as much as I loved to lean into the work, I had no idea what was coming next. And from that group, I ended up connecting with now my current mentor, who is a mind-body medicine doctor. She said, you know, you're a healer, right? No. Yes, you are. And I want you to work with me. And now I'm going into almost 3 years of facilitation and connecting with veteran groups that we bring them to the medicine in traditional settings, in retreats, and I'm able to provide the same support that was offered to me. Psychedelic medicine is something that, particularly for the veteran community, for a lot of us, it's the last stop. If this doesn't work, then I get to exit this world because nothing is going to help me. And experiencing being a spiritual doula for these peers and these friends and this community, what else is there? How much better can it get other than maybe legalization? I don't know if that's a... So I posed a challenge to you. You see me here as this queer woman veteran. How many veterans are in your life, queer or not? Do you know their story? Would you like to know their story? And if there's any advice I can share with you all about this specific community, connection, authenticity, and inclusion means so much. And that could be shared through a simple conversation. So the next time you interact with your veteran, have the conversation. What'd you find? Take them out to lunch. Get to know them a little better. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of assumptions and stereotypes, and just like the queer community experiences, we're in a very unique pocket where not a lot of people understand us. And sometimes the most important thing that you can do is to see us. Thank you.